I'm Leona Reyes, 26 years old. Until 6 months ago, I believed that success meant lifting up the people you love. Then the day I handed my parents the deed to their house, completely paid off, changed everything. I thought I was saving them. Instead, I lost them entirely. My mother's words still echo in my mind. You think your money makes you better than us? You've shamed this family. What she didn't know was that I had been secretly paying their bills for 2 years, watching from the shadows as they struggled with mounting debt and pride. I had sacrificed everything: relationships, comfort, even my own apartment for months, to build something that could pull us all out of poverty. But when I finally succeeded, when I could finally breathe and help them breathe too, they suffocated me instead. How do you come back from being disowned by the very people you thought you were saving? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mortgage papers sit in my safe now, crisp and official, stamped with "paid in full" in bold red letters. I keep them not as a trophy, but as evidence of the day everything went wrong. Sometimes I take them out and stare at the signatures, mine confident and flowing, my parents' names printed by the bank clerk because they refused to sign anything themselves. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the house first, about the family that lived inside it, and about the girl who thought she could fix everything with enough zeros in a bank account. Growing up on the east side of Austin in the early 2000s, our neighborhood was a patchwork of old Mexican families like ours and young artists drawn by cheap rent. Our street, Chestnut Avenue, was lined with small post-war houses that had seen better decades. Ours was painted a faded yellow that my father touched up every few years with whatever paint was on sale at Home Depot, creating a strange mosaic of slightly different shades. The house had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen so small that only one person could stand in it at a time. My parents slept in the master bedroom, and I had the smaller room until my younger brother Miguel was born when I was 8. After that, we shared the space with a curtain hung down the middle for our privacy. Miguel died in a car accident when he was 16, and after the funeral, I moved back into that room alone. I kept his half exactly as he'd left it, his clothes still folded in his dresser, his skateboard propped against the wall, his half of our shared desk still cluttered with his drawings of superheroes and lowrider cars. My father, Carlos, worked at Ruiz Auto Shop on Cesar Chavez Street for 15 years. He had strong hands that always smelled like motor oil and WD-40, hands that could coax life back into the most stubborn engines. He was quiet by nature, speaking mostly in Spanish at home, English only when necessary for work or dealing with my school. His silence wasn't hostile, it was thoughtful, deliberate. When he did speak, we listened. My mother, Marta, was his opposite in many ways. Where he was quiet, she filled every silence. Where he was steady, she was mercurial, her moods shifting like Texas weather. She cleaned houses for wealthy families in Westlake Hills, leaving our house at 5 in the morning and returning after dark, her back aching and her hands red and cracked from chemicals. She took pride in her work, often telling me about the beautiful homes she maintained, the imported marble she polished, the gardens she helped tend. "Mija," she would say, settling into our threadbare couch after work, "you should see the kitchen in the Henderson house. It's bigger than our whole living room. Granite countertops, a refrigerator that makes ice in 4 different shapes. But you know what? They never cook. I clean that kitchen every week, and the only thing that gets dirty is the coffee machine." These stories weren't told with bitterness exactly, but with a kind of wondering sadness. She wanted more for us, but more felt impossibly distant. Money was always tight. I learned early to navigate the rhythms of our financial life, which, weeks we'd have name-brand cereal, which months the electricity might get turned off for a few days until my father could scrape together the reconnection fee. I learned to be grateful for hand-me-down clothes from my mother's employers, to make a school lunch last 2 days when the food stamps ran low at the end of the month. But there was love in that small house, even when there wasn't enough of anything else. My father would teach me about cars in our driveway, showing me how to check oil and change a tire. My mother would braid my hair for school each morning, her fingers gentle despite their calluses, humming old songs her own mother had sung. To her in Guadalajara, I was a good student, the kind teachers remember fondly. Not because I was particularly brilliant, but because I was hungry. Hungry for knowledge, for opportunities, for a way out that didn't feel like abandonment. I spent hours at the public library after school, both because we didn't have internet at home, and because the library was quiet and warm and felt like possibility. It was at that library when I was 14 that I first encountered programming. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, had set up a computer lab for teens, and she taught basic HTML and CSS to anyone interested. I was fascinated by the logic of code, the way you could build something from nothing with just the right combination of characters and commands. While other kids my age were discovering social media, I was discovering the power of creating digital worlds. Mrs. Chen noticed my aptitude and suggested I apply for a summer coding camp at UT. The program was free for low-income students, but it required a computer and transportation. I spent weeks working up the courage to ask my parents, knowing that even the gas money for daily trips to campus would be a stretch. When I finally brought them the application, my mother looked at it like it was written in a foreign language, which, in a way, it was. "Programming?" she said, struggling with the English word. "What is this? Like TV programming?" I tried to explain, but the concepts felt abstract even to me then. All I could say was that it was about computers, about building, things that could help people, about opportunities. My father looked at the papers for a long time. Finally, he said, "If this helps you learn, we find a way." That summer changed everything. I learned Java and Python, built my first website, and met other kids who talked about technology like it was magic they could control. I met Nadia there. She was a year older, from a middle-class family in Round Rock, but she didn't make me feel ashamed of my thrift store clothes or the fact that I had to take the bus while she got dropped off in her mom's Honda. "Code doesn't care where you come from," she told me one day as we debugged a particularly stubborn program together. "It only cares if you can think logically and solve problems. Everything else is just noise." Nadia became my closest friend, then later my business partner. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. That summer, I realized that technology could be my bridge out of poverty. Not just for me, but potentially for my family. I started to dream about creating something that could generate real money. Something that could lift all of us up together. High school was a blur of AP classes, part-time jobs, and every free moment spent learning new programming languages and frameworks. I worked at a taco truck on weekends, served coffee at a study hall near campus, and tutored younger kids in math. Every dollar went toward a laptop fund, which took me 2 years to save for. My parents were proud, but also puzzled by my intensity. They understood hard work. They'd been working hard their entire lives, but they didn't understand work that didn't immediately result in visible progress. You could see a clean house or a fixed car. You couldn't see code. "Mija," my mother would say, watching me hunched over my secondhand laptop at our kitchen table. "You work so hard on that computer. But what are you building? Where is it?" I would try to show her websites I'd created, apps I was developing, but to her they were just images on a screen. The value was abstract, the potential invisible. College was a negotiation. I'd been accepted to several universities with partial scholarships, but even with financial aid, the costs were daunting. My parents wanted me to go. They understood that education was important, but they also needed my income from my part-time jobs. "You could go to community college," my mother suggested. Live here, save money, maybe study business or nursing, something practical. But I knew that staying in Austin, staying in our neighborhood, staying within the safe boundaries of what my family understood, would mean staying within the financial boundaries we'd always known. I needed to take a bigger risk. I chose UT's computer science program, took out loans that made my parents nervous, and moved into a dorm room that cost more per month than our house payment. The guilt was crushing at first. Every meal I ate at the dining hall, every textbook I bought, every late night in the computer lab felt like a luxury stolen from my family's table. But I also felt alive in ways I'd never experienced. I was surrounded by brilliant people working on projects that could change the world. I learned about algorithms and data structures, about user experience and market research. I discovered that the digital worlds I'd been building in my bedroom could actually solve real problems for real people. It was during my junior year that the idea for my app first came to me. I was struggling to manage my own budget. Loans, part-time job income, textbooks, rent, and existing budgeting apps either cost money I didn't have or were too complicated for someone living paycheck to paycheck. I wanted something simple, visual, that could help people like me see exactly where their money was going and find small ways to save without feeling deprived. I called it Pennywise, a budgeting app designed specifically for people with irregular income and tight margins. Instead of focusing on investment strategies and retirement planning like most financial apps, Pennywise helped users track small expenses, find subscription services they'd forgotten about, and identify opportunities to save $5 or $10 here and there. For someone making minimum wage, saving $10 a week could mean the difference between making rent and being evicted. I spent my entire senior year developing Pennywise with Nadia, who had transferred to UT and was studying business. She handled the marketing and user research while I focused on the code. We tested it with students, with workers at local restaurants and shops, with anyone who would give us 10 minutes of their time. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. People loved that the app didn't shame them for spending money on small pleasures. Instead, it helped them find room in their budgets for both necessities and occasional treats. The interface was intuitive, available in Spanish and English, and designed for people who didn't have financial literacy backgrounds. We launched Pennywise 6 months after graduation. Neither of us had jobs. We were living off credit cards and hope, sleeping on friends' couches, eating ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. For 3 months, we had maybe 100 users and no revenue. I was starting to think we'd have to give up and find regular jobs when something clicked. A personal finance blogger with a large following wrote about Pennywise, calling it the first budgeting app that understands what it's actually like to be young and broke. Downloads exploded overnight. Within a week, we had 5,000 users. Within a month, 15,000. The premium version, which cost $2.99 a month and offered features like bill reminders and savings goal tracking, was generating enough revenue for Nadia and me to rent a small office space and pay ourselves modest salaries. But the real breakthrough came when we added a feature that let users anonymously share money-saving tips with each other. The community aspect transformed Pennywise from a simple budgeting tool into a social platform where people could support each other through financial challenges. Users were sharing everything from which grocery stores had the best sales to how to negotiate medical bills to creative ways to earn extra income. 6 months after launch, we had 50,000 active users. A year later, 200,000. Venture capital firms started reaching out. We raised our first round of funding, $1.2 million, and suddenly I found myself with a bank account that had more money than my parents had earned in their entire lives combined. The first thing I did was call my mother. "Mommy," I said, my voice shaking with excitement and disbelief. "The app is working, really working. I'm going to be able to help now. With the house, with everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, in a voice I didn't recognize, she said, "Mija, you don't owe us anything. We've been taking care of ourselves long before you were born." It was the first warning sign, but I didn't understand it then. I thought she was just being modest, proud in the way parents are when they don't want to burden their children. I thought that once she saw what this could mean for our family, she'd understand. I was wrong about so many things. The bank statement that changed everything sits in my desk drawer now, printed on cream-colored paper with my account balance highlighted in yellow marker, $847,253.67. That was the day I realized I had enough. Not just enough to live comfortably, but enough to fix the problems that had haunted my family for as long as I could remember. It was a Tuesday morning in March when I made the decision. I'd been awake since 5, running numbers in my head, calculating mortgage balances and credit card debt, estimating what it would take to make my parents truly financially secure. The math was surprisingly straightforward. Their remaining mortgage balance was $67,000. They had maybe $15,000 in credit card debt, and my father's truck needed a new transmission that would cost another $3,000. For less than what I'd made, in the previous quarter alone, I could eliminate every financial stress that had shaped my childhood. I called the mortgage company first. The customer service representative seemed confused when I explained that I wanted to pay off someone else's loan. "Are you sure about the account number?" she asked. "Carlos Reyes at 1247 Chestnut Avenue?" "Yes, that's correct. That's my father." "And you want to pay the full remaining balance of $67,247.8030? "Yes." There was a pause. "Okay, well, we'll need written authorization from the account holder, and then we can process a payoff. Let me transfer you to our payoff department." The next hour was a maze of paperwork and verification calls. They needed my father's permission to discuss the account with me, then his signature on forms authorizing the payment, then verification of my identity and the source of funds. Each step required phone calls home, and with each call, my parents. Confusion grew. "Mija," my father said during the third call, "why are you asking about our mortgage? Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Papi. Better than fine. I just want to help with something. Can you please sign the paper the bank sent over? I'll explain everything tonight." That evening, I drove to Chestnut Avenue in my new Honda Civic. Nothing flashy, but the first car I'd ever owned that didn't require prayers before starting. The house looked smaller than I remembered, more weathered. The yellow paint was peeling again, and the front steps sagged slightly under their own weight. But it was home, and soon it would be theirs completely. I found my parents in the kitchen. The mortgage paperwork spread across our small table next to my mother's purse and my father's work clothes from that day. They looked tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of people who had been fighting uphill battles for decades. "Sit down, Mija," my mother said, pouring me a cup of coffee from the pot that was perpetually brewing on our counter. "Explain to us what all this is about." I took a breath and pulled out my laptop, opening a spreadsheet I'd prepared with our family's financial picture. Numbers made sense to me. I thought they would make sense to them, too. "Okay," I began. "You know the app has been doing really well, better than I ever imagined, and I've been thinking about what success actually means, what it's for." My father nodded slowly. My mother watched me with the intense focus she brought to everything important. "I make good money now, really good money." And I was looking at your mortgage balance and your credit cards, and I realized I can fix this. All of it. Today. I turned the laptop toward them, showing them the breakdown. Your mortgage has about $67,000 left. The credit cards are around $15,000 total. Dad, I know you need transmission work. That's another $3,000, maybe $4,000. For less than $90,000, I can make all of your debt disappear. Forever. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. My mother's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. My father stared at the screen, as if the numbers were written in a language he didn't recognize. "Leona," my mother said finally, setting down her cup with careful precision. That's a lot of money." "It is," I agreed. "But it's not most of my money. And think about what it means. You could quit one of your cleaning jobs. Dad could work on cars because he loves it, not because he has to. You could travel. You could breathe. My father looked up from the laptop. Mija, this house. We've been paying on it for 22 years. It's almost ours. It can be yours right now, I said. Completely yours. No more payments. No more worry about property taxes or insurance. I can set up accounts for those too. But instead of relief or joy, what I saw in their faces was something else entirely. Something that looked almost like fear. You want to buy our house? My mother asked, her voice strange and tight. No, Mommy. I want to pay it off, for you. It's still your house, your name on the deed. I just want to eliminate the debt. But then we would owe you, she said. You wouldn't owe me anything. This is a gift. This is what family does when they have the ability to help. My father reached across the table and closed my laptop gently but firmly. Leona, where we come from, when someone pays your debts, you owe them your debts, plus interest, plus gratitude, forever. But I don't want anything back, I insisted. I want you to be free. Free? My mother's voice rose slightly. Or obligated to you instead of the bank? I felt the conversation slipping, away from me, the careful logic of my spreadsheets crumbling against something I hadn't anticipated. I don't understand. This is good news. This is the best possible news. My mother stood up and began clearing the table, her movements sharp and agitated. You think we can't take care of ourselves? You think your father and I are failures who need our daughter to rescue us? That's not what I think at all, I said. But even as the words came out, I wondered if that wasn't exactly what I thought. Hadn't I always seen their financial struggles as problems to be solved? Hadn't I always assumed that given the resources, I could manage their lives better than they could? We've been taking care of this family since before you were born, my father said quietly. We've never missed a payment, never declared bankruptcy, never asked anyone for help. But you don't have to struggle anymore, I said. I have the money. I want to share it. Share it? My mother said, turning back toward me. Or control it. If you pay our mortgage, who decides if we can remodel the kitchen? If you pay our credit, cards, who decides what we're allowed to buy? If you pay for everything, who are we? The question hung in the air like smoke. I realized with growing horror that I hadn't considered these implications at all. In my mind, eliminating their debt was purely positive. More freedom, less stress, more options. I hadn't thought about how it might feel to have your adult daughter swoop in and rearrange your financial life, no matter how good her intentions. I just want to help, I said, my voice smaller than I intended. Help? My mother said. Or show off. Look how successful I am. Look how much money I make. Look how I can save my poor parents. That's not fair, I said, though part of me wondered if it was exactly fair. My father sighed and reached for my hands across the table. His were still stained with today's work, still carrying the smell of motor oil that had been the scent of my childhood. Mija, he said, you have done something incredible. This app, this business, we are proud of you. So proud. But pride is complicated. I don't understand. When I was your age, he continued, my father lost his job. The factory closed, moved to Mexico, where they could pay workers less. We were broke, had nothing. My uncle offered to help, pay our rent, buy groceries, keep us afloat until my father found work. He paused, looking down at our joined hands. My father was grateful, but also smaller afterward. Every family dinner, every holiday, every conversation somehow came back to what we owed my uncle. Not money, gratitude, respect, deference. My father never felt like an equal again, never felt like the head of his own family. But this is different, I said. I'm your daughter. Family. Sometimes family is the most complicated of all. My mother said, sitting back down, because family is supposed to be forever. We talked for another 2 hours that night, going in circles around the central question. What does it mean to help someone who doesn't want to be helped? What does it mean to love someone in a way they don't want to be loved? I thought I was offering freedom. They heard control. I thought I was showing love. They heard condescension. I thought I was solving problems. They heard judgment of their ability to solve their own problems. By the time I left that night, we had reached an uneasy compromise. They would think about it. They would discuss it privately. They would let me know. But I could see in their faces that their answer was already no. I drove home to my apartment, a 1-bedroom in a trendy part of town that cost more per month than my parents' mortgage payment, and sat in my car for a long time in the parking garage, trying to understand what had just happened. I had thought the hardest part of success would be achieving it. I had never considered that the hardest part might be figuring out what to do with it once you had it, especially when the people you most wanted to share it with didn't want what you were offering. Over the next few weeks, I tried different approaches. Maybe the mortgage was too big a gesture, too threatening to their autonomy. So I offered smaller things, to pay for my father's truck repair, to cover my mother's medical bills from a recent dental procedure, to set up college funds for my cousins. Each offer was politely declined. "We're managing fine," became my mother's standard response. "We've got it handled," my father would say. But I knew they were struggling. I could see it in the way my mother's hands were getting more gnarled from the cleaning chemicals, in the way my father's back was starting to curve from years of bending over car engines. I could hear it in the careful way they talked around money, the subtle rationing of electricity and heat, the generic brands that filled their refrigerator. So I started helping in secret. It began small and practical. Their electric bill arrived in the mail, and I called the utility company to add credit to their account. "Anonymous payment," I told the representative. "Don't indicate who it came from." When my father mentioned that the transmission repair estimate was higher than expected, I called the shop and paid the bill in advance. "Customer wanted to prepay," I instructed them to tell him. Didn't leave a name. I set up automatic payments for their property taxes, their homeowner's insurance, their water bill. I researched their credit card companies and made payments just large enough to cover the monthly minimums plus a little extra toward principal. For 6 months, I was their anonymous benefactor, watching their stress levels decrease without them, knowing why. Their electricity never got shut off during the summer when the AC bill spiked. My father's truck ran smoothly with regular maintenance they thought they were budgeting for themselves. My mother started talking about maybe reducing her hours with one of her cleaning clients. I told myself I was respecting their autonomy while still taking care of them. I told myself this was the perfect solution. They kept their dignity, I kept my family safe. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. The truth started to unravel on a humid Thursday in September. I was at my office reviewing user engagement data for Pennywise's latest update when my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen, which was unusual. He rarely called during work hours. "Leona?" he said, his voice tight with something I couldn't identify. "Can you come home tonight? Your mother and I need to talk to you." "Of course," I said. "Is everything okay?" There was a long pause. "We'll discuss it when you get here." The drive to Chestnut Avenue felt longer than usual. Austin traffic moved with typical sluggishness, giving me too much time to imagine what might be wrong. Had one of them been diagnosed with something serious? Were they getting divorced? Had something happened to one of my cousins? I found them waiting for me in the living room, which immediately told me this was serious. The living room was for special occasions and difficult conversations. Everyday life happened in the kitchen. My mother sat on the edge of the couch, her posture rigid. My father stood by the window, looking out at the street rather than at me. On the coffee table between them was a stack of papers. "Sit down, mija," my mother said. I sat in the armchair across from her, the same chair where I'd done homework as a child, where I'd had my first serious conversation about boys, where they'd told me that Miguel had been killed. "We know what you've been doing," my father said, still facing the window. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" My mother reached for the papers on the coffee table. "The electric company made a mistake on our bill this month. Instead of showing zero balance like usual, it showed all the payments for the last 6 months, including the ones that came from your credit card." She handed me the statement. There it was, in black and white. My name associated with payment after payment, thousands of dollars I thought I'd hidden carefully. "So we called the insurance company," my father continued, finally turning to face me. "And the tax assessor's office, and the auto shop." His voice was getting quieter with each sentence, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd been yelling. "And we found out that our daughter has been lying to us for months," my mother finished. The word lying hit me like a physical blow. "I wasn't lying," I said weakly. "I was helping." "By going behind our backs?" my mother said. "By making us feel like we were managing our own lives when you were actually managing them for us?" "I was trying to respect your wishes," I said. "You didn't want me to pay everything off at once, so I found a way to help that wouldn't hurt your pride." "Pride?" my father said, and for the first time in my life, I heard real anger in his voice. "You think this is about pride, isn't it? This is about trust," my mother said, "about honesty, about respect. You made us feel like failures who can't handle their own finances. Then you made us feel like fools who don't even know their own finances." I felt tears starting behind my eyes. "I was trying to take care of you." "We didn't ask you to take care of us," my father said. "We asked you to respect our decision, and instead, you decided you knew what was best for us, better than we know what's best for ourselves. But you were struggling," I said. "You are struggling. I have the money to fix that. What kind of daughter would I be if I just watched you suffer when I could help? The kind of daughter who trusts her parents to live their own lives," my mother said. We sat in silence for several long minutes. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, the sound of traffic on Cesar Chavez Street, the hum of our old air conditioning unit working harder than it should. Finally, my father spoke. "How much?" "What?" "How much money have you spent on us without our knowledge?" I thought about lying, minimizing, but what was the point? "About $30,000 over 6 months. My mother made a sound like she'd been punched. My father sat down heavily in his recliner. $30,000, he repeated. "It's not that much," I said. "Not compared to what I make. And it's made such a difference for you." "Stop," my mother said, holding up her hand. "Just stop." We sat in the quiet of that word for a long time. "What happens now?" I asked eventually. My parents looked at each other, one of those wordless conversations that couples have after decades together. "Now," my father said, "you stop. All of it. No more payments, no more anonymous help, no more managing our lives. And we pay you back," my mother added. "You don't have to. We pay you back," she repeated firmly. "Every dollar. With interest if necessary. We'll get a loan, if we have to." "That doesn't make any sense," I said. "You'll end up paying more in loan interest than—" "That's our choice to make," my father said. "Our debt to carry, our life to live." I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. But as I drove home that night, I realized that something fundamental had shifted between us. I had thought I was being loving, generous, responsible, but I had also been arrogant, controlling, and deceptive. I had become exactly the kind of person I'd always disliked, someone who thought money gave them the right to make decisions for other people, even with the best intentions. The worst part was that I still believed I was right. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. My mother's. Rosary beads tell a story of faith worn smooth by decades of worry. The black wooden beads have been polished to a soft sheen by her fingers, and the silver crucifix has a small dent from the time she dropped it during Miguel's funeral mass. She kept those beads in her purse always, reaching for them during difficult conversations, financial stress, or when she was praying for guidance about her stubborn daughter who thought money could solve everything. The morning after our confrontation, about my secret payments, I woke up to 17 missed calls from my mother. 17, in the space of 4 hours, starting at 5 a.m. My first thought was that someone had died. No one calls that many times unless there's an emergency. I called, back immediately, my hands shaking as I pressed her contact. "Mija," she answered on the first ring, her voice strained and exhausted. "Thank God. I've been calling and calling." "What's wrong? What happened?" "Your father is in the hospital." The words hit me like cold water. "What? When? Why didn't you?" "He had chest pains around midnight. Bad ones." I called the ambulance and they brought him to Brackenridge. They're running tests now. I was already reaching for my keys. "I'm coming." "No," she said quickly. "Not yet. Wait until I know more. I needed to tell you, in case..." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. In case this was serious. In case this was goodbye. In case all our fighting about money and pride and autonomy suddenly became irrelevant in the face of mortality. "Mom, please let me come. I can be there in 20 minutes. The doctor is supposed to come talk to me soon. Let me call you back when I know something." She hung up before I could argue, leaving me standing in my apartment at 6:30 a.m., still in yesterday's clothes, holding my phone like it might ring again if I stared at it hard enough. I spent the next 3 hours pacing my living room, checking my phone every 30 seconds and torturing myself with possibilities. Heart attack, stroke, an aneurysm like his brother had suffered 5 years earlier. Each scenario played out in my mind with devastating clarity, and in every version, our last real conversation had been about money and disappointment. When my mother finally called back, her voice was different, tired, but relieved. "It's not his heart," she said. "The doctor says it's stress, something called costochondritis, inflammation in his chest that mimics heart attack symptoms." "Stress," I repeated. "Yes. Too much stress over too long a period. The doctor wants to keep him, for observation. But he should be able to come home tonight." I closed my eyes and felt something tight in my chest finally release. "Can I see him now?" Another pause. "Leona, he's very upset. About everything. About last night. About the money. About feeling like he can't take care of his own family. That's exactly why I need to see him. To apologize. To explain. To explain that you were right and we were wrong," my mother interrupted. "To explain that his stress about money is silly because you have enough money to fix everything? That's not what I was going to say." "What were you going to say?" I opened my mouth and realized I didn't have a good answer. What had I been planning to say? That I was sorry for helping them? That I was sorry for caring? That I was sorry for having money when they didn't? "I want to say that I love him," I said finally, "and that I'm sorry he's hurting." "He knows you love him," my mother said, her voice softer now. "But love isn't enough to fix this. Love without respect isn't really love at all." Those words stayed with me as I drove to the hospital anyway, despite her request that I wait. I needed to see with my own eyes that my father was okay, and I needed to try to repair whatever I had broken between us. I found my mother in the cardiac unit waiting room, still wearing the clothes she'd thrown on when the ambulance came. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she looked smaller than usual, more fragile. She was holding her rosary beads, working through the prayers with the automatic rhythm of someone who had been raised on Catholic ritual. "I told you to wait," she said when she saw me. but there was no real anger in it. I couldn't, I said, sitting down beside her. Is he sleeping? No. He's awake, grumpy, complaining about the hospital gown and the food and the fact that he's missing work. Can I see him? She looked at me for a long moment, those dark eyes that had always been able to see straight through to my motivations. What are you going to say to him? I don't know, I admitted. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe that's the problem, she said. Maybe you can't fix everything. Room 247 was small and sterile, with one window overlooking the hospital parking lot. My father was propped up in bed, looking uncomfortable and tired but reassuringly alive. He had monitors attached to his chest and an IV in his arm, but his color was good and his eyes were alert. Mija, he said when he saw me, managing a small smile. Your mother told you not to come yet. Since when do I listen to what I'm told? I said, trying to match his light tone. Since never, he agreed, and gestured to the chair beside his bed. Sit. Tell me about work. Tell me about anything except hospital bills and chest pains. So I did. I told him about Pennywise's latest features, about a partnership we were negotiating with a major bank, about Nadia's terrible dating stories and my equally terrible attempts at cooking, normal daughter things, normal father-daughter conversation. But, underneath the casual talk, I could feel the weight of everything unsaid, the money I'd spent without their knowledge, the trust I'd violated, the ways I'd tried to help that had only hurt. Finally, during a lull in conversation, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Dad, I'm sorry, I said. I'm so sorry. He was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the Austin skyline in the distance. I know you are. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I didn't mean to make you feel like I didn't trust you to handle your own life. But you didn't trust us, he said gently. You saw problems that needed fixing, and you fixed them. Without asking. Without considering how it might feel to be fixed. I was trying to help. I know. And that's what makes this so hard. He turned back to me. You're a good daughter, Leona. A generous daughter. But generosity without wisdom can be its own kind of cruelty. I felt tears starting again. I don't know how to be wise. I only know how to solve problems. Some problems aren't meant to be solved by other people, he said. Some problems are meant to be lived through, worked through, survived. They make you stronger, more resilient. When you take that away from someone, even with love, you take away their chance to grow. But you were suffering. We were struggling, he corrected. There's a difference. Suffering is pointless pain. Struggling is meaningful work towards something better. We sat quietly for a while, watching the afternoon light change through the hospital window. Finally, he reached over and took my hand. Tell me about the first time you felt proud of yourself, he said. The question surprised me. What do you mean? The first time you accomplished something difficult on your own, something nobody helped you with. I thought back through my childhood, through all the small victories and hard-won achievements. Probably when I finally debugged that program at coding camp, I said, the one I'd been working on for weeks. Mrs. Chen offered to help, but I wanted to figure it out myself. When I finally got it working, it felt like you could do anything? Yes. Like I was capable of more than I'd realized. He nodded. That's what we've been trying to tell you. Every time your mother and I pay our bills on time, every time we figure out how to fix something that's broken, every time we solve a problem on our own, we get that same feeling. Not as big, maybe, but the same pride. The same sense of capability. But it's so much harder for you than it needs to be. Everything worthwhile is hard, he said. Easy doesn't teach you anything about yourself. I understood suddenly what I'd been taking away from them. Not just the burden of financial stress, but the satisfaction of overcoming that stress. Not just the worry, but the pride that came with managing worry successfully. "I still want to help," I said. "I can't just watch you struggle when I have the resources to make things easier." "Then ask us how we want to be helped," he said. "Don't assume you know what we need. Don't decide for us what would make us happy." "What do you need?" I asked. He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him since this whole mess started. "Right now, I need to get out of this hospital and back to my own bed. I need to go back to work tomorrow and tell Ramon about the crazy night I had. I need to feel like myself again. And long-term? Long-term, I need to know that my daughter respects me enough to let me live my own life, even when she disagrees with my choices." When my mother returned from the cafeteria with coffee for all of us, she found my father and me talking quietly about his plans for fixing up the garage behind their house, a project he'd been dreaming about for years but couldn't afford to tackle. I was asking questions instead of offering solutions, listening instead of calculating costs. "The doctor says you can go home in a few hours," she told him, settling into the second chair. "But you have to take it easy for the rest of the week. No heavy lifting, no working late." "I'll drive him to work and pick him up," I offered, then caught myself. "If you want me to. If that would be helpful." My parents exchanged a look. Surprise, maybe, that I'd asked instead of announced. "That would be helpful," my father said. "Thank you." It was a small thing, offering rides for a week, but it felt like the beginning of something different between us. Something based on communication instead of assumption. As we prepared to leave the hospital that evening, my mother pulled me aside in the hallway. "The $30,000, she said quietly. "We're still going to pay it back." "Mom, we're going to pay it back," she repeated. "But maybe we can work out a payment plan that doesn't destroy our budget. Maybe we can talk about it like adults instead of you making decisions for us." I nodded. "Whatever you think is fair." She studied my face for a moment, then reached into her purse and pulled out her rosary beads. "I've been praying about this situation," she said. "About you, about us, about what family means." "What did you decide?" "I decided that family means loving people enough to let them make their own mistakes, and trusting people enough to believe they can learn from those mistakes." She pressed the rosary into my hands. These were my mother's. She gave them to me when I got married, to help me remember that some things are bigger than our immediate problems. The beads were warm from her touch, smooth and comforting. "I can't keep these," I said. "You can borrow them," she said. "Until you figure out how to balance your heart and your head. Until you learn the difference between helping and controlling." I closed my fingers around the rosary, feeling the weight of decades of prayer and worry and hope. "How will I know when I've learned?" "You'll know when you can offer help without being hurt if someone says no," she said. "When you can love people without trying to fix them." That night, I sat in my apartment holding my grandmother's rosary beads, not praying exactly. I'd never been as religious as my mother, but thinking about the space between love and respect, between generosity and control, between helping and healing. I thought about my father lying in that hospital bed, stressed enough about money and autonomy to literally give himself chest pains. I thought about my mother working multiple jobs to maintain their independence, her hands growing more arthritic each year, but her dignity intact. And I thought about myself, sitting in my comfortable apartment with my successful business and my good intentions, finally beginning to understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is nothing at all. The rejection letter from Stanford arrived on a Tuesday in March during my senior year of high school, thin and formal in my hands. I knew before opening it what it would say. Acceptance letters come in thick envelopes, rejection letters in thin ones. Still, seeing the words, "We regret to inform you," felt like a punch to the stomach. I'd kept that letter for 8 years now, tucked between the pages of my old AP Computer Science textbook. Not as a reminder of failure, but as evidence of how much rejection could fuel determination when you channeled it correctly. Looking at it now, sitting in my office 2 weeks after my father's hospital scare, I realized it represented something else entirely. The moment I'd decided that I would never again let anyone else's assessment determine my worth. But maybe I'd learned the wrong lesson. Maybe I'd become so determined to prove everyone wrong that I'd lost the ability to accept when I might be wrong myself. The past 2 weeks had been a careful dance of rebuilding trust with my parents. I drove my father to work each morning, picking him up from the small house on Chestnut Avenue and dropping him at Ruiz Auto Shop, then reversing the journey each evening. During those 20-minute drives, we talked about safe subjects: the weather, his work, Austin's traffic, anything except money or family obligations. But I could feel him watching me, evaluating whether I'd really learned anything from our confrontation or whether I was just biding my time until I could resume my role as their unofficial financial manager. The careful politeness between us felt fragile, like we were all walking on eggshells that might crack at any moment. At work, I threw myself into penny-wise development with an intensity that worried Nadia. We were preparing to launch a new feature that would help users find and negotiate better rates on their existing bills: phone plans, insurance, subscriptions. It was exactly the kind of practical tool that had made Pennywise successful, but I found myself obsessing over every detail, staying in the office until midnight and coming in before dawn. "You're acting like someone who's avoiding going home," Nadia observed one Thursday evening, finding me still at my desk at 9 p.m., surrounded by empty coffee cups and energy bar wrappers. "I'm not avoiding anything," I lied. "I'm just focused." "On what?" "The code for this feature has been solid for weeks. We've tested it 6 ways from Sunday." "What are you actually working on?" I gestured at my screen, which showed lines of code. I'd been refactoring for the 3rd time that day. "Optimization, performance improvements." "Bullshit," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Talk to me. What's really going on?" So I told her. About the secret payments, about my parents' reaction, about my father's hospitalization, about the careful distance that now existed between us, about how I thought I was being loving and supportive, but had actually been controlling and disrespectful. And, "Now I don't know how to be their daughter," I finished. "I don't know how to love them in a way they can accept." Nadia listened without interrupting, her expression growing more thoughtful as the story unfolded. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Of course. When you were growing up, did your parents ever give you money or support that you didn't ask for?" I thought about it. "All the time. They paid for my school supplies, my food, my clothes. They drove me to library programs and coding camp. They supported my college applications, even when they didn't understand what I was applying for. And how did that feel? Grateful, loved, supported. Did you feel like they were trying to control you? No, but that's different. I was a child. They were supposed to take care of me." "Okay," Nadia said. "Now think about this. When they gave you support, did they ask you first what kind of support you wanted? Did they check with you before buying groceries you might eat or paying for textbooks you might need?" I saw where she was going with this. "No, but they made decisions about what you needed based on their assessment of your situation," she continued. "They spent money on you without consulting you about whether you wanted that specific help in that specific way. It's not the same thing, isn't it? Or is the only difference that you were okay being helped, and they're not?" I stared at my computer screen, watching the cursor blink on a line of code I'd been staring at for 20 minutes. "So what are you saying? That I was right? To pay their bills?" "I'm saying that maybe the problem isn't what you did, but how you did it. Maybe the problem is that you treated them like children instead of like partners." "I don't understand the difference." Nadia leaned forward. When your parents helped you, they did it openly. They talked to you about it. They made it clear that their support came with love, not judgment. They didn't hide their help or act like they knew better than you what you needed. But they did know better. I was 17, and they're adults who've been managing their own finances longer than you've been alive, she pointed out. The difference isn't competence. The difference is respect. She stood up and gathered her jacket. Go home, Leona. Stop trying to solve this with code. Some problems require conversations, not algorithms. But I wasn't ready for more conversations. I was still trying to understand the conversations I'd already had. That weekend, I found myself driving through my old neighborhood aimlessly, looking at the small houses and wondering about the lives inside them. How many families were struggling with money? How many were stressed about bills and debt and the constant pressure of making ends meet? How many had daughters or sons who'd achieved financial success and wanted to help, but didn't know how? I ended up parking across the street from our house, on Chestnut Avenue, watching my parents through the living room window. They were sitting together on the couch, my mother reading and my father watching television. It looked peaceful, domestic, normal. It looked like people who were managing their lives just fine without my intervention. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian, my ex-boyfriend who still lived in the neighborhood. Saw your car. Everything okay? I looked around and spotted him, sitting on his front porch 3 houses down, watching me watch my parents. Julian had always been observant, one of those people who noticed when something was off. I got out of the car and walked over to his house. Julian was 27 now. With the same easy smile and artistic hands that had first attracted me in high school, he worked as a tattoo artist at a shop on South Lamar, and his arms were covered with intricate designs. Some his own work, some done by friends and colleagues. Want to talk about whatever has you stalking your own family? He asked, patting the step beside him. I sat down, grateful for the familiar comfort of his presence. Julian and I had dated through most of high school and into my first year of college, breaking up amicably when it became clear that I was going to build my life outside the neighborhood, and he was committed to staying. We'd remained friends, though we rarely talk these days. I messed up, I said, and found myself telling the story again. Julian listened with the same patient attention he'd always brought to my problems, asking clarifying questions but not rushing to judgment. When I finished, he was quiet for a while, watching kids play soccer in the street under the orange glow of streetlights. You remember when you got that first internship at the tech company? He said finally. Yeah, junior year of college. You came home that first weekend so excited, talking about all the things you were learning, all the opportunities you were seeing. And you kept talking about how you were going to save everyone. I did remember. I'd been dizzy with possibility, imagining how I could use my newfound knowledge and connections to lift up everyone I cared about. You had this whole plan, Julian continued. You were going to get me a job at a tech company, even though I'd already told you I wanted to be an artist. You were going to convince your parents to move to a better neighborhood, even though they loved this one. You were going to fix everyone's life according to your vision of what a good life looked like. That's not what I was doing now, I protested. Isn't it? He turned to look at me. Leona, you've always had this thing where you think love means solving people's problems for them. Even in high school, you couldn't just be supportive. You had to be helpful. You couldn't just listen. You had to fix. What's wrong with wanting to help people? Nothing when they want your help. Everything when they don't. He stood up and brushed off his jeans. Come on, let's walk. I want to show you something. We walked through the neighborhood as darkness settled in, past houses I'd known since childhood. Julian pointed out changes I hadn't noticed. New paint, jobs, added porches, gardens that had been expanded or redesigned. "Mrs. Rodriguez got that new fence last year," he said, gesturing toward a neat wooden barrier around a small front yard. "Saved up for 2 years to pay for it herself. She was so proud when it was finished." "It looks nice," I said, not understanding his point. "Her son wanted to pay for it," Julian continued. "He's a doctor now, lives in Houston, has plenty of money. But she told him no, she wanted to do it herself. Took her twice as long, cost twice as much stress, but it's hers in a way it wouldn't have been if he'd just written a check." We passed the auto shop where my father worked, closed now but with security lights illuminating the small office and 3 service bays. "Your dad loves working there," Julian said. "You know that, right?" "I know he likes fixing cars." "No, I mean he loves working there. Ramon treats him like family, trusts him with the complicated repairs. He comes in early because he wants to, not because he has to. He takes pride in keeping that place running." I stopped walking. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe your parents don't want to be saved from their life. Maybe they like their life. Maybe they've built something meaningful here, something that has value even if it doesn't include financial security." We walked back toward his house in silence. As we reached his front porch, Julian turned to me one more time. "You know what I think you should do?" he said. "What?" "Ask them. Not how you can help them, not what they need from you. Ask them what they're proud of. Ask them what they love about their life. Ask them what they've built that they want to protect. And then, what? Then listen, really listen, and maybe you'll understand that love isn't about making people's lives easier. Sometimes love is about making people's lives more meaningful." I drove home that night thinking about meaningfulness versus ease, about pride versus comfort, about the difference between solving problems and honoring struggles. I thought about the rejection letter from Stanford and how it had taught me that other people's assessments of my worth weren't the final word on my capabilities. Maybe my parents deserved the same respect, the right to define their own worth, to choose their own struggles, to find their own meanings in their own lives. Maybe the most loving thing I could do was trust them to know what they needed, even when it looked like struggle from the outside. Maybe helping people meant asking what kind of help they wanted, instead of giving them what I thought they should want. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I might be learning the right lesson. The medical bills were hidden in my father's toolbox, underneath a layer of wrenches and socket sets, wrapped in a plastic bag like contraband. I discovered them by accident 3 weeks after our hospital conversation, when I was helping him organize his garage for the renovation project he'd been dreaming about. We'd been working in comfortable silence, sorting through decades of accumulated tools and parts, when I reached for a heavy wrench set and knocked over the entire contents of his main toolbox. Screwdrivers and pliers scattered across the concrete floor, along with a sealed plastic bag that split open to reveal a stack of medical papers. "Mija, don't," my father started, but I was already kneeling on the garage floor, gathering up invoices and insurance statements that told a story I hadn't known existed. Bills from Dr. Martinez, the cardiologist, Dr. Patel, the oncologist, Austin Cancer Center, Central Texas Imaging. Page after page of charges, some marked paid, others stamped past due, all dated within the last 18 months. "Dad," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" He sat down heavily on his work stool, suddenly looking every one of his 58 years. "It's nothing for you to worry about." "Nothing to worry about?" I held up a bill for $3,200 from an oncology consultation. "Dad, this says oncology, cancer doctors." "It's handled," he said, reaching for the papers. "Everything's under control." But I was already reading through the stack, my mind racing to make sense of the timeline. The first appointment with Dr. Martinez had been in January of last year, 2 months before I'd first offered to pay off their mortgage. The cancer scare had been in March, followed by a series of tests and consultations that had lasted through The summer. You had cancer, I said. It wasn't a question. Had a scare, he corrected. Turned out to be nothing. Benign. But the tests, the specialists. He gestured helplessly at the bills in my hands. I calculated quickly, adding up the totals on each statement. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket, costs were staggering, easily $15,000, maybe $20,000. This is why you couldn't afford the house payments, I said, understanding flooding through me. This is why you were behind on credit cards. It wasn't because you were bad with money. It was because you were dealing with a medical crisis. My father nodded slowly. We didn't want to worry you. You were just getting your business started, working so hard. We thought we could handle it ourselves. Handle it how? I looked at the past due notices, the payment plan agreements, the careful notations in my father's handwriting tracking which bills had been paid and which were still outstanding. Dad, some of these are from collection agencies. We're managing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I thought about the past year, all the times I'd offered help, all the times they'd refused, all the times I'd assumed their financial struggles were just the normal challenges of working-class life. I'd been trying to solve what I thought was a budget problem when they'd been fighting a medical crisis. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because you would have done exactly what you're doing now, my mother's voice said from the garage doorway. She'd been in the house making lunch for the three of us, but she must have heard our conversation. You would have taken over, made it your problem to solve. She walked into the garage and sat on the step leading to the house, looking tired, in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. We wanted to handle our own crisis, she continued. We wanted to prove to ourselves that we could get through something hard without our daughter having to rescue us. But I could have helped, I said. I could have paid these bills easily. You didn't have to suffer through collection calls and payment plans and— Suffer? My father interrupted. Who said we were suffering? I gestured at the bills. This, all of this. The stress, the financial pressure, the uncertainty about your health and your ability to pay for treatment. That wasn't suffering, my mother said quietly. That was life. That was us taking care of each other, working together to solve a problem, figuring out how to get through something difficult. She reached for some of the bills and spread them out on my father's workbench. Look at these payment plans. Your father negotiated every one of them himself. Look at these insurance appeals. I wrote every letter, made every phone call. Look at this spreadsheet where we tracked every payment, every balance, every deadline. I looked where she was pointing and saw for the first time not just bills and stress, but evidence of competence. Evidence of two adults working systematically through a complex problem, finding solutions, making progress. We did this together, my father said. Your mother and I, as a team. It was hard, yes. Stressful, yes, but we handled it. We figured it out. We're almost finished paying everything off. But you could have been finished a year ago if you'd just let me help. And then what would we have learned about ourselves? My mother asked. What would we have proven? That we can be saved by our successful daughter, but we can't save ourselves. I sat on the garage floor, surrounded by medical bills and tools, trying to understand how something that looked like a crisis to me could look like an accomplishment to them. Trying to comprehend how my offers of help, which felt loving and generous, to me could feel diminishing and disrespectful to them. I still don't understand, I said finally. You were worried about money. You were stressed about bills. You were working extra hours to cover medical expenses. I had the resources to eliminate all of that stress instantly. Why choose the hard way when there was an easier option? My parents looked at each other, one of those wordless conversations that long-married couples have. Mia, my father said. Come here. Let me show you something. He led me to the far corner of the garage, where he'd been slowly clearing space for his dream workshop. There wasn't much there yet. just a cleaned concrete floor and some pegboard he'd hung for tool organization. But he stood in the center of the space like he was surveying a kingdom. "For 20 years I've wanted to fix up this garage," he said. "Make it into a real workshop where I could work on cars for myself, maybe take on some side jobs, teach neighborhood kids about engines and repair work." "It's going to be great," I said, not understanding why he was showing me this now. "I never had the money to do it properly," he continued. "Every time I saved a little bit, something else came up. Miguel's school expenses, your college applications, car repairs, house maintenance. Always something more important." He walked over to his workbench and picked up a notebook I'd seen him writing in earlier. "But 6 months ago, after we figured out the payment plan for the medical bills, I realized something. We had created a system. We had learned how to manage our money carefully, how to prioritize expenses, how to make hard choices and stick to them." He opened the notebook and showed me pages of careful calculations, budget spreadsheets, savings goals. So I applied that same system to this workshop project. I set a goal, created a timeline, figured out how to save a little bit each month toward supplies and equipment. Look. I looked at his meticulous planning, his careful tracking of progress toward a goal that would take him 2 years to achieve if everything went according to plan. "I could have this workshop finished next month if you paid for it," he said. "But then it would be your workshop that you bought for me. This way, when it's finished, it will be my workshop that I built for myself. But what if you get sick?" "Again?" I asked. "What if there's another emergency that derails your savings plan?" "Then we'll handle that too," my mother said, joining us in the corner of the garage. "Together, like we handled the medical bills. And if you can't handle it, then we'll ask for help," my father said. "Specifically, from people we trust. When we actually need it, not when someone else thinks we need it." I looked around the garage, at the medical bills scattered on the workbench, at the cleared corner where my father planned to build his workshop, at my parents standing together in the space they'd created for their dreams. "I keep getting it wrong," I said. "Every time I think I understand, I find out there's something else I missed. Some other way I've been arrogant or presumptuous or disrespectful." "You're not arrogant," my mother said. "You're young. You think problems are meant to be solved quickly. We know that some problems are meant to be lived through slowly." "But I want to help," I said, and heard the plaintive note in my own voice. "I want to be useful to you, to contribute something meaningful to our family." "You are helping," my father said. "Right now. By being here, by listening, by trying to understand instead of trying to fix. By respecting us enough to let us tell our own story," my mother added. "By loving us enough to let us be proud of our own accomplishments." We spent the rest of the afternoon organizing the garage, working together on a project that had clear boundaries and mutual benefits. I helped carry heavy items. My father directed the overall organization. My mother sorted through boxes of household items that had somehow migrated to the garage over the years. It felt good to be useful without being controlling, to contribute without taking over. For the first time in months, I felt like I was helping in a way that actually helped. As we finished up, my father pulled me aside. "There is something you could do for us," he said, "if you want to help." "Anything," I said, probably too eagerly. "Help us understand your business better. Not the money part, not how much you make or what you could afford to give us. The work part. What you're building, who you're helping, why it matters to you." "Why?" "Because we want to be proud of you in ways that have nothing to do with money," my mother said. "We want to understand what you've accomplished, not just what you've earned." That evening, I brought my laptop to their kitchen table and showed them Pennywise the way I should have from the beginning. Not as a source of income that could solve their problems, but as a project I was passionate about, work that felt meaningful, something I'd built that I was proud of. I showed them user testimonials from people who'd used the app to pay off debt, build emergency funds, and gain control over their finances. I explained the features we were developing, the problems we were trying to solve, the communities we were hoping to serve. My parents asked thoughtful questions about user privacy, about accessibility for people who weren't comfortable with technology, about how we planned to keep the app affordable for people who needed it most. "It's like what I do with engines," my father said at one point. "You look at something that's not working properly. You figure out what's wrong, and you build a solution." "Except instead of cars, it's people's financial lives," my mother added. "Exactly," I said, and felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with money or success or proving anything to anyone. We talked until late that night, and for the first time since I'd started making real money, the conversation with my parents wasn't about what I could give them or what they needed from me. It was about what I'd created, what they'd accomplished, and what we were all proud of in our separate but connected lives. When I left that night, my father handed me back some of the medical bills. "Take these," he said. "Why?" "So you understand the full story. So you know that when we turned down your help, it wasn't because we were too proud to accept it. It was because we were already handling something bigger than you knew about, and we were handling it well." I drove home with those bills on my passenger seat, evidence of a crisis I'd never known existed, and a competence I'd never fully acknowledged. My parents had been fighting a battle I hadn't even known was happening, and they'd been winning it without my help. The next morning, I called my mother. "I want to pay back that $30,000 you spent on us," she said before I could speak. "Okay," I said. "How?" "Payment plan. $200 a month for 12 years. We've already talked to the bank about setting up automatic transfers." "That's a long time," I said, "and you'll end up paying interest." "It's our choice," she interrupted gently. "Our timeline, our terms." "Okay," I said again. "I respect that." "Good," she said. "Now tell me about this new feature you're working on, the one that helps people negotiate their bills. I might know some people who could use that." For the first time in our relationship, my mother was asking about my work, not because she was worried about me or proud of my success, but because she thought I was building something useful that could help people she cared about. It felt like the beginning of something entirely new between us. Tia Sol's letter arrived on a Wednesday morning in November, written in her careful cursive on lavender stationery, faintly scented with the vanilla perfume she'd worn since I was a child. It was slipped under my apartment door before I left for work, my name on the envelope in the formal style she'd learned in Catholic school 70 years earlier. Miss Leona Maria Reyes. Inside were 3 pages, front and back, filled with the kind of wisdom that comes from decades of complicated family dynamics. Tia Sol had always been the family member who said what everyone else was thinking, but too afraid to voice. The one who called out hypocrisies, challenged assumptions, and offered perspectives no one else wanted to hear, but everyone needed. "Mija," the letter began. "Your mother told me about the troubles you've been having with your parents over money and respect. She asked me not to interfere, but when has that ever stopped me from offering my opinion?" I sat on my couch reading, coffee growing cold as I absorbed her careful analysis of our family crisis. "I've watched this family for 65 years, she wrote, "and I've seen this fight play out in different generations with the same tension. Your grandfather fought with his brother about money. Your mother fought with her parents about independence. Now you're fighting with your parents about success, obligation, and what it means to love well." She wrote about the patterns she'd observed, how prosperity and poverty created different stresses, how success sometimes drove wedges between people who loved each other, and how the best intentions could cause the deepest hurts without wisdom and humility. "The problem," she said, "is not that you want to help your parents. The problem is that you think helping means solving, and solving means controlling. But real help, the kind that strengthens people instead of diminishing them, looks very different." Tia Sol shared her own experience leaving the family's traditional Catholic faith and moving to Houston to live with her partner, Maria, a decision that estranged her from my mother for years. She'd learned that love sometimes requires distance, respect requires boundaries, and family sometimes means supporting choices, even when you disagree. I spent 10 years trying to convince your mother my life was valid, that my choices were reasonable, that my happiness mattered as much as her comfort with tradition, she wrote. I thought if I explained myself well enough, she'd accept me. But what I was really asking for was her approval, and approval can't be demanded. It must be given freely. The turning point came not when my mother approved, but when Tia, Sol, stopped needing that approval. When I stopped trying to convince her I was right, she stopped feeling like she had to prove I was wrong, the letter said. When I stopped offering solutions she hadn't asked for, she stopped feeling I thought she was incompetent. When I asked about her life instead of explaining mine, she felt valued as a person, not as a project. She addressed my situation, directly, with both challenge and compassion. You think your parents' financial struggles are problems to solve, but they think of them as life to be lived. You think your success gives you the right to improve their circumstances, but they think their experience gives them the right to choose. You think love means fixing, but they think love means accepting. Tia Sol offered suggestions, ways to support that strengthen rather than replace, questions to ask instead of solutions to impose, boundaries to protect relationships while allowing care. Ask what they're proud of instead of what they need help with. Ask what they've learned instead of what they struggle with. Ask what they want to share instead of what you want to fix. She ended with an invitation. Come to Houston next weekend. Bring Nadia if she's free. Maria and I want to cook for you and talk about all the things your mother won't. Family money, success guilt, the difference between helping and enabling, and how to love without trying to save. I read the letter 3 times before work, carrying it like a roadmap for conversations I didn't yet know how to have. At the office, Nadia was reviewing user analytics from our latest app update, her desk covered with charts and graphs. Good news, she said. The bill negotiation feature is performing better than expected. Users are saving $127 per month on average. That's great, I said, still distracted by Tia Sol's letter. What's that? Nadia asked, noticing. I handed it to her. Advice from my aunt, the one estranged from my mother. She read it thoughtfully, then looked up with relief. This is really good advice. Are you going to take it? I think so. She invited us to Houston. Want to come? Absolutely. I've been wanting to meet the woman who navigated family conflict successfully. She paused. Also, I want to talk business. Stuff connected to your family stuff. What kind of things? I've been thinking about Pennywise's mission, who we're trying to serve and why, she said. Your struggles might be telling us something about the company's direction. I was intrigued, but confused. Explain. Well, Pennywise started as a budgeting app for people with limited resources, right? Those struggling financially who needed tools to manage money better? Right. But as we added features, we started attracting users who aren't struggling financially. They just want to optimize spending, track investments, plan major purchases. I nodded. Our user base had expanded beyond our original target. That's good for business, Nadia continued, but it changes our focus. We're spending development time on features for middle-class users with complex portfolios, instead of features for working-class users with immediate financial needs. She pulled out user feedback folders. Look at these support requests. Investment tracking, retirement planning, tax optimization. Valuable, but not for the people we first designed the app to help. I saw the pattern. Our success pulled us upward toward more affluent users, and we responded to their requests, drifting from our original mission. What are you suggesting? I asked. Maybe your experience with your parents is teaching us about helping versus taking over, she said. Maybe we need to be intentional about who we build for and why. She showed me a proposal, a separate Pennywise tier designed for users living paycheck to paycheck, with irregular income or multiple jobs. Basic Pennywise would focus on budgeting and saving, she explained. Simple interface, multiple languages, for people without financial literacy or reliable internet. And Premium Pennywise would handle complex features? Exactly. Investment tracking, retirement planning, tax optimization, all for users with discretionary income and complex needs. I studied her plan, impressed. This would split our user base. It would serve them better, she corrected. Right now, we try to be everything for everyone, but do it poorly. This way, we build the best tools for those who need them. And financially? Premium users would subsidize Basic Pennywise, she said. Higher fees from affluent users fund low-cost access for those who need it most. Elegant in its simplicity, it addressed what had bothered me about our development direction without my realizing it. We'd been offering my parents financial solutions suited for my world, large lump sums, debt elimination, comprehensive security, when they needed smaller, manageable assistance fitting their system and values. So what would Basic Leona look like? I asked, half joking. Basic Leona would ask what her parents need instead of assuming, Nadia said. Offer small, specific help instead of comprehensive fixes. Support their goals instead of imposing yours. That afternoon, I called my mother and asked if I could bring Nadia to dinner Sunday after our trip to Houston. Not to discuss money or problems, but to show new features we were developing and get feedback on whether these tools would really help people like them. You want our opinion? My mother sounded surprised. I want your expertise, I said. You and Dad have managed money carefully for decades. We want input from people who understand the real challenges. What kind of input? Practical. Is the interface intuitive? Are categories relevant? Would saving suggestions work for someone with your income? Are bill negotiation scripts realistic or pushy? She was quiet. The TV murmured in the background. You really want to know what we think? She finally said. I do. Not as your daughter asking for approval, but as a business owner asking for consultation. Okay, she said. We can do that. Friday afternoon, Nadia and I drove to Houston to visit Tia Sol and Maria in their small bungalow near the Heights. The house was bright turquoise with white trim, surrounded by a garden of vegetables mixed with flowers, organized chaos, lush and wild. Tia Sol met us at the door wearing a paint-stained apron and a wide smile. At 72, she was vibrant and sharp, silver hair pulled back, eyes missing nothing. Mija, she said, hugging me. And you must be Nadia. I've heard so much. Maria appeared from the kitchen, wiping hands on a towel. Quieter than Tia Sol but warm, with an easy smile making everyone comfortable. We're making mole, Maria said. Sol's grandmother's recipe. Takes all day, but worth it. We spent the afternoon in their kitchen, helping prep and talking about family dynamics, business ethics, and the complicated relationship between success and obligation. Tia Sol and Maria had been together 35 years, building a life despite family disapproval and social challenges. They developed a perspective on love and support both practical and profound. The thing about family money, Tia Sol said, grinding spices, is it's never really about money. It's about power and control. Who decides whose life? But shouldn't people with resources share with family? Nadia asked. Of course, Maria said. But sharing isn't taking over. Sharing is offering. Taking over is deciding. They told us about financial inequality in their relationship. Maria inherited money. Tia Sol lived on a teacher's salary. And how they navigated the power dynamics money creates. I wanted to pay for everything, Maria said. House, cars, vacations. I thought it was generous, loving, practical. Why should we both struggle when I had enough? And I felt like I was disappearing, Tia Sol added. Like I was Maria's dependent instead of partner. Like my contributions didn't matter because they weren't financial. How did you work it out? I asked. We created separate spheres, Maria explained. I pay big things, Mortgage, repairs, travel. Saul pays daily, groceries, utilities, entertainment. Both contribute by resources but have areas we control. And both have veto power, Tia Sol said. If I'm uncomfortable with a big purchase, Maria doesn't make it. If she thinks I'm spending too much on groceries, we talk. It was a model of partnership honoring resources and autonomy, allowing different contributions without hierarchy or dependence. Could that work with family? Nadia asked. Any relationship where people want to support without controlling, Maria said. The key is negotiation, not assumption. Boundaries, not unlimited access. Partnership, not charity. That evening, we ate mole on the back porch and talked about Pennywise's mission. Tia Sol and Maria listened to Nadia's proposal for basic and premium features, asking thoughtful questions about accessibility, affordability, and cultural competence. You know what I think? Tia Sol said. Your app and your family problem are the same challenge. How do you help without diminishing? How do you offer without creating dependence? How do you support goals without imposing? And how do you build something that serves people where they are, not where you think they should be? Maria added. We talked late into the night. By Saturday afternoon, on the drive back to Austin, Nadia and I planned our presentation for my parents, not asking for approval, but genuine consultation on whether we were building tools to serve their reality. You ready? Nadia asked near Austin. I think so, I said. For the first time in months, I feel like I might be asking the right questions instead of offering the wrong solutions. The family portrait that had hung in our living room for 15 years lay in pieces on my parents' kitchen table, its frame cracked diagonally across the glass. It was one of those formal family photos taken at a department store when I was 12, all of us dressed in coordinated blue shirts, smiling with the forced cheerfulness that studio photography required. Miguel had been 14 then, still, alive and full of the restless energy that made him fidget through the entire photo session. I knocked it off the wall by accident, my mother said, carefully picking glass shards out of the frame. I was dusting, and my elbow caught the corner, but I could see in her face that it hadn't been an accident. The way she handled the broken pieces told me this was something else entirely. It was Sunday evening, 2 days after our trip to Houston. Nadia and I had come to dinner as planned, laptops and mock-ups in hand, but instead of a work session, we'd walked into the aftermath of something quiet and heavy. My father sat silently at the table's end. My mother filled the silence with chatter about neighbors and work, anything but what was clearly bothering them. Now, with dinner dishes cleared, and our laptops still in their bags, we were all gathered around the broken portrait like it was evidence. Maybe I can get it reframed, I offered. It's fine, my mother said. It's just a picture. But we all knew it wasn't just a picture. It was the last photo of our complete family. The last proof of a simpler time, when Miguel was still with us and money hadn't complicated every conversation. Mommy, I said gently, what's really going on? She looked up, and in her expression I saw something I rarely did. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. We got a call yesterday, she said. From Aunt Carmen, about your grandfather. Her father, in declining health, had been living in an expensive assisted living facility in San Antonio. Carmen had managed his care and finances for years. Something had changed. The facility is closing, my father said. Corporate buyout. All the residents have to relocate within 60 days. Okay, I said, so he'll move to a different one. It's not that simple, my mother said. She handed me a folder. Bills, statements, Medicaid forms. The new facilities are either much more expensive or much lower quality, she continued. The affordable ones have waiting lists months long. I flipped through the papers. Quality dementia care ran between $4,000 and $6,000 a month. My grandfather's savings and Social Security wouldn't last more than a few months. Carmen asked if we could help. My father said. How much? $2,000 a month, my mother said. Split between Carmen, Roberto, and us. $2,000 a month was manageable for me, difficult for my parents, and probably impossible for Uncle Roberto, who worked construction and had 3 kids. That's not sustainable, I said. Even equally split, it's a strain. Which is why Carmen suggested that maybe, my mother trailed off. Maybe what? Maybe you could help, my father said, since you have the resources. The request hung in the air. Everything we'd talked about for months, autonomy, respect, the line between helping and controlling, was now personal and immediate. Of course I can help, I said. I can cover the full cost if necessary. But instead of relief, their faces shifted to something else. Disappointment? Resignation? Just like that? My mother said. You'll just take over? I'm not taking over, I protested. I'm offering to help. By making it your crisis instead of ours, my father said. Solving it your way instead of letting us work through it. I felt frustration rise. Why should we all struggle when I can handle the cost easily? Because it's not your decision to make alone, my mother said. It's a family decision, about family money for family care. But I'm family too, and I have the money. Having money doesn't make you the family financial manager, Nadia said gently. She'd been silent until now, but spoke with the same calm she used when delivering tough news. You're treating a complex situation like a simple financial problem, she continued, assuming that because you can pay, you should make the decisions. I looked at all of them, at the broken portrait on the table. So what should I do? Let him end up in a terrible place because of a principle? No, my father said. You should ask what we think we should do. You should offer to be part of our plan, my mother added, instead of replacing it. You should ask what's needed before offering a solution, Nadia said. I sat back. I'd done it again, jumped to financial control instead of seeking collaborative help. Okay, I said. Tell me what you've been discussing. My mother pulled out another folder. Charts, spreadsheets, notes. Carmen sent us info on every facility. In San Antonio, she said. We've called them all. Asked about payment plans, sliding scales, charity care. She laid out spreadsheets comparing costs, quality, and availability. We found 3 places that offer good care, my father said. One has sliding scale fees, another has payment plans, another offers scholarships for families in hardship. We also talked about contributing based on ability, my mother added. Not equal amounts, fair amounts. It was impressive, thorough and thoughtful. This is really good, I said. How can I help? My father leaned in. Do you want to be part of our solution or be the solution? I want to be part of it, I said, unsure what that meant in practice. Then let's figure that out, my mother said. They walked me through their proposal. The best facility, Sunset Manor, would reduce costs for my grandfather to $3,200 per month. Carmen and Roberto can manage $800. We can do $600. That leaves $1,800, my father said. So you're asking me to contribute that? Yes, my mother said. And stay involved, not just write checks. I'm in, I said. What else? My mother blinked, surprised. You're not going to argue that you should just pay for everything? No. I'm asking how I can be helpful within the plan you already have. Well, she said slowly, someone needs to visit the facilities. Carmen can't take time off, and Roberto doesn't have reliable transportation. I can do that, I said. And someone needs to understand the legal and Medicaid paperwork, my father added. I can handle that too. We spent the next hour dividing responsibilities. I left with a list of specific tasks that made me part of the solution, not the entire solution. This feels different, I said. How? Nadia asked. It feels like I'm helping their plan instead of pushing mine. Because you are, my mother said. You're being our daughter, not our parent. As we left, my mother wrapped the broken photo carefully. I'm going to get this restored, she said. I thought you said it was just a picture. It is, but it's ours. Maybe it's worth fixing. Driving home, Nadia and I reflected on the evening. You're getting better at this, she said. Slower to jump in, quicker to ask. I'm trying. But it's hard to unlearn the habit of thinking money equals control. Money is a resource, she said. It can be shared in lots of ways, not all of them controlling. The next week, I spent 3 days touring facilities in San Antonio. I took photos, videos, notes. I met with 2 elder law attorneys to understand Medicaid applications and legal needs. I compiled everything into a report for the family, and, instead of making recommendations, I asked for input. Our family conference call to decide was unlike anything before. Everyone brought insight. Carmen knew his routines. Roberto assessed physical conditions. My parents understood the costs. I brought legal and logistical detail. We chose Sunset Manor together and developed a transition plan. Carmen handled daily contact. Roberto provided transport. My parents coordinated the paperwork, and I provided the financial bridge. Nobody felt overruled or indebted. Everyone played a role. Everyone stayed involved. You know what's different about this? My father said on that final call. What? This time nobody owes anybody. We're all contributing what we can, getting what we need, and owning the outcome. 2 weeks later, my grandfather moved in without incident. It was the first time I'd used money to help my family in a way that felt truly collaborative. It was also the first time I fully understood having money doesn't mean I get to make decisions for others. It means I have the opportunity to support their decisions, respectfully, meaningfully. The difference was subtle, but it changed everything. The new business cards arrived on a Thursday morning in December, clean and simple with my name, title, and contact information in elegant typography. But what made them special wasn't the design. It was what they represented. Instead of founder and CEO, my title now read Founder and Chief Technology Officer, reflecting the reorganization Nadia and I had completed the previous month. Pennywise had grown beyond what either of us could manage alone, and we'd decided to bring in an experienced CEO to handle operations and scaling, while I focused on product development and our mission to serve underbanked communities. It was a decision that had required me to give up some control and authority, something that would have been impossible for me just 6 months earlier. The business cards were a symbol of how much I'd learned about the difference between owning something and controlling it, between being responsible for outcomes and micromanaging every process. I was looking at them when my mother called that morning, her voice bright with excitement. "Mija, I have news," she said. "Your father finished the garage workshop." "Already?" I asked. According to his careful timeline, the project wasn't supposed to be completed until spring. "He's been working on it every evening and weekend," she said. But also, Mrs. Henderson, one of my clients, she was throwing away some perfectly good tools and equipment when her husband passed away. She offered them to your father instead of taking them to Goodwill. "That's wonderful," I said, and meant it. "Is he happy with how it turned out?" "Come see for yourself," she said. "We want to show you something." That afternoon, I drove to Chestnut Avenue to find my father in his completed workshop, teaching 3 neighborhood teenagers how to change spark plugs on an old Honda Civic. The garage had been transformed into a clean, organized workspace with pegboard tool storage, a proper workbench, good lighting, and enough room to work on 2 cars simultaneously. "Mija!" my father called when he saw me. "Perfect timing. Come meet my students." The teenagers, 2 boys and a girl, all around 16, looked up from the engine they were working on and nodded politely. My father introduced them as Roberto, Jr., Uncle Roberto's oldest son, Maria Santos from down the street, and David Chen, whose parents owned the corner grocery store. They're learning basic automotive maintenance, my father explained, beaming with pride. Oil changes, tire rotations, brake inspection, simple repairs. Things that can save people hundreds of dollars if they know how to do them themselves. Watched him work with the teenagers, patient and encouraging as he guided them through each step of the spark plug replacement. His teaching style was hands-on but respectful. He demonstrated techniques, explained the reasoning behind each step, and made sure everyone understood before moving on. "This is amazing, Dad," I said, when the lesson was finished and the teenagers had gone home with promises to return the following Saturday. "It's what I've always wanted to do," he said, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Teach people skills that make them more self-sufficient. Share what I know with the next generation." "How did you find students?" "Word got around," my mother said, joining us in the garage. "People know your father is honest and patient. Parents started asking if he could teach their kids basic car maintenance instead of them having to pay shop rates for simple things." "Do you charge for the lessons?" "A little," my father said. $20 per session to cover materials and shop supplies. But mostly people contribute however they can. Roberto brings lunch for everyone. Mrs. Santos lets us use her Wi-Fi to look up repair manuals online. The Chen family provides drinks and snacks. It was exactly the kind of community-based resource sharing that Tia Sol and Maria had talked about. Everyone contributing according to their ability. Everyone benefiting according to their need. "There's something else we want to show you," my mother said, leading me toward the house. In the kitchen, she'd set up a small desk area with a computer, printer, and filing system. The computer was older, probably 5 or 6 years old, but it looked well-maintained and functional. "I'm starting a small business," she announced. "What kind of business?" "Bookkeeping and administrative services for other housekeepers and home care workers," she said. "A lot of the women I work with are independent contractors now instead of employees. They need help with taxes, invoicing, scheduling, basic business records." She showed me a simple website she'd created, nothing fancy but clean and professional. Advertising, services like tax preparation, invoice creation, appointment scheduling, and basic financial planning for small service businesses. "Mrs. Henderson helped me set this up," she continued. "She used to manage a small accounting firm before she retired. She's been teaching me QuickBooks and basic bookkeeping principles." "This is incredible, Mom," I said, genuinely impressed by the scope and thoughtfulness of her business plan. "How many clients do you have?" 6 so far, she said. "Women who clean houses, babysitters, home health aides, people who provide services but don't have time or knowledge to manage the business side." "What do you charge?" "It depends on what they need," she said. "Some people need full bookkeeping services. That's $50 a month. Some just need help with quarterly taxes. That's $25 per session. Some just need someone to help them organize their records and teach them how to do it themselves. That's a one-time fee." I looked at her pricing structure, her client list, her systematic approach to building a business that served people in her own community. It was sophisticated and sustainable, designed to be helpful without being exploitative. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the hospital scare," my father said. "We realized that if something happened to one of us, the other person needed to have more financial independence. Your mother always wanted to use her organizational skills for something bigger than just managing our household. And I realized that I know a lot about managing money carefully," my mother added. "I know how to stretch a budget, how to prioritize expenses, how to save for emergencies. Those are skills that other people need too." We spent the next hour going through her business plan, her client contracts, and her projection for growth over the next year. She'd thought through everything: liability insurance, tax implications, marketing strategies, pricing adjustments for different service levels. "You're both entrepreneurs now," I said, sitting at their kitchen table surrounded by evidence of their small but growing businesses. "We learned from watching you," my father said. "We saw how you identified a problem and built a solution. We thought we could do something similar in our own community." But smaller scale, my mother added. More personal, focused on people we actually know and problems we actually understand. As I prepared to leave that evening, my mother handed me a wrapped package. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was the restored family portrait, the glass replaced and the frame repaired. But the photo itself looked different somehow, clearer, more vivid, like the restoration process had brought out colors and details that had faded over time. "It's beautiful," I said. "Thank you." "The restoration specialist said something interesting," my mother said. "He said that sometimes when glass breaks, it's because the photo needs to be seen more clearly. The glass was old and cloudy, blocking some of the image. The crack forced them to replace it with clearer glass." I looked at the photo, at Miguel's bright smile, at my parents' younger faces, at my own 12-year-old self looking confident and hopeful, and understood what she was saying. "Are we clearer now?" I asked. "We're more honest," my father said. "About what we need from each other, about what we can offer each other, about what love looks like when it's not trying to fix everything." Over the following weeks, I found myself visiting Chestnut Avenue more often, but in a different way than before. Instead of coming with offers of help or solutions to problems I'd identified, I came to learn about their businesses, to meet my father's students, to understand the services my mother was providing to other working women. Sometimes I could offer useful resources. I connected my mother with a local small business development center that offered free workshops on marketing and business planning. I helped my father research wholesale suppliers for automotive parts and tools. I shared contacts from Pennywise's user research who might be interested in their services. But mostly, I just listened and learned. I learned that my parents had been building something meaningful in their community long before I'd achieved financial success. I learned that their struggles with money hadn't been evidence of incompetence, but evidence of resilience. I learned that their refusal of my help hadn't been about pride, but about protecting something valuable they'd built together. At work, our restructuring of Pennywise was proving successful. We'd launched Pennywise Basic as a free app with essential budgeting tools available in English and Spanish, funded by subscriptions to Pennywise Premium. User feedback was overwhelmingly positive, especially from communities that had been underserved by traditional financial apps. More importantly, the separation had clarified our mission and improved our focus. Instead of trying to build features that served everyone, we could concentrate on building the best possible tools for specific communities with specific needs. "You know what I realized?" Nadia said one afternoon as we reviewed user analytics from the latest app update. "What?" "We've been applying everything you learned with your family to how we build and deliver our product," she said. "Asking users what they need instead of assuming we know what they need. Building tools that enhance people's existing financial strategies instead of replacing them. Offering support without taking control." She was right. The lessons I'd learned about respect, autonomy, and collaboration in my family relationships had fundamentally changed how I approached product development and business strategy. "Maybe that's what growth actually looks like," I said. "Not just getting better at what you were already doing, but learning to do things in completely different ways." That evening, I called Tia Sol to update her on my parents' businesses and my own evolving understanding of family dynamics. "I'm proud of you, mija," she said, when I finished describing the changes in our relationships. "You've learned something that takes most people decades to figure out." "What's that?" "That love isn't about making people's lives easier," she said. "Love is about making people's lives more meaningful. Sometimes that's the same thing, but usually it's not." As December moved toward January, I found myself reflecting on the year that had changed everything. 12 months earlier, I'd thought that success meant having enough money to solve other people's problems. I'd thought that love meant providing solutions, that generosity meant giving people what I thought they needed, that family meant being responsible for everyone's well-being. Now I understood that success meant having the resources to support other people's goals, that love meant respecting people's autonomy, that generosity meant offering help that enhanced rather than replaced people's own efforts, and that family meant being trustworthy enough to be included in other people's plans. The new business. Cards in my wallet represented more than a job title change. They represented a fundamental shift in how I understood power, responsibility, and relationships. On New Year's Eve, my parents invited me to join them and several neighbors for a small celebration in my father's workshop. The teenagers he'd been teaching brought their parents, my mother's business clients came with their families, and Tia Sol and Maria drove up from Houston to join us. As midnight approached, we stood in a circle in the garage that had been transformed. From a storage space into a community gathering place, my father offered a toast with plastic cups of champagne and sparkling cider. To building things that last, he said, and to learning that the best things are built together. Looking around at the faces in that circle, family and friends and neighbors who had supported each other through struggles and celebrated each other's successes, I finally understood what wealth really meant. It wasn't about having enough money to fix other people's problems. It was about having enough trust to be included in other people's solutions. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.